The Newcomer, page 126. The invitation got Terry from the bed. Without saying a word, he rose, not bothering to cover himself, as his matrix had not done so. The niece started the shower while Terry went to the toilet room. When he returned, she was already in the shower. "My matrix," he called to the cloud-like body, watching the water envelop her with a layer of crystal. "Yes, Terry, come on in," she answered. He slid the door open and stepped in. My matrix was rinsing the shampoo from her hair. When she was through, she opened her eyes and smiled at Terry. Offering him the spray as she moved away from it, he accepted and walked in face first to allow the water to revive his brain. Soapy hands met his back as the shower spilled through his hair. Her touch made him reach for the wall as she stepped in closer to massage his shoulder. Her fingers pressed into his flesh, then slid down his back, rippling his muscles and his passion. She stepped into the spray to press her breasts into his back. When she did so, Terry's other hand reached for the shower wall. Gripping his waist for support, she rubbed her hard nipples up and down his slippery skin. Terry's head fell in surrender. The niece's desire intensified as she lay across his back and allowed one of her hands to leave its place on his waist. It traveled down the length of Terry's thigh before reaching up and across to his body to stroke his arousal. Moaning, Terry turned to kiss the niece, but she moved away from him, turned and steadied herself against the shower wall. She looked back at Terry from over her shoulder. "Feel me," she said, and Terry obliged. February 1st, 1988. I complained to the nurses about constipation. I'll never do that again. The effects have kept me in here. It does give me more time to write, though. I've been thinking about Ridgely Stream, where my grandfather used to take me fishing as a boy. We used to hike a couple miles through the woods behind his house to the perfect spot in a twinkling clearing where the fish bit harder than ticks on an old coon dog. We'd spend hours there saying everything by saying nothing. I'd watch him scoop minnows into his net, then dump them into the shallow bait bucket. His brown spotted hand would plunge into that bucket and swiftly snatch a minnow. Rarely did his old hand come out empty. That tiny fish would bring back a bigger one. That one bring back an even larger one. A logical progression that only seemed to work for Grandpa. We wouldn't bring the fish back to the house for cleaning. That process was taken care of on his filleting rock. He'd scrape off those scales in what seemed like one pass from his knife, then slice into the belly and scoop out the guts with one fell swoop. Of course, it took more scoops than one, but I was a kid. He'd then lop off his tail and his head with little flair save swiftness, then deftly slice and pull the meat from the bones, leaving a full skeletal frame for me to admire. Not hardly, but into a clean bucket the fillet went for Grandma with the promise of dinner fit for King Midas himself. Thank you, God, for sparing Grandma and Grandpa from the atrocity of this existence. Diana felt ill for having snuck into Lanice's chambers. She thought that she would have outgrown his practice by now. Standing in the foyer, she debated whether or not to stay. She knew that Lanice wouldn't be back that night, being obligated to spend it with her charge. That thought clinched her decision. She stormed into the room. Out of all the duties to which she had surrendered her lover, indoctrinating charges was the most vile. She paced before the balcony windows, cursing the Holy Mother Matrix for taking Lanice away from her. Diana had long rescinded her devotion to the Holy Mother. There was no way that an all-loving matrix would allow one of her daughters to live with the pain that Diana lived with. The Holy Mother Matrix had to be a wicked mother, to pour salt into Diana's wounds with every charge Lenise taught. Her last indoctrination had put Diana over the edge. The tourniquet was tied, and the hypodermic needle paused above the straining vein before reason engulfed her, causing her to smash the lethal needle to the floor. That was 2 years ago, and here she was, once again. Thoughts of suicide were far from her mind now. She blasphemed the Holy Mother enough to know that this was her last life. She hadn't bartered her life thread with a seductress yet, but wasn't far from it. She wanted more than the way would allow. She wanted Lenise. Her reflection in the mirror glared back at her, a mocking mask of mental anguish. No tears fell from the whimpering eyes. Bile rose into her stomach at the sight of this blubbering slave. She ran from the bedroom and into the toilet room where she relieved herself of dinner. While drying her face, she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The sight made her go back to the toilet room and vomit again. "You weak excuse of a female," she said for the reflection while cleaning herself for the second time. "You don't deserve Lenise." She quit the room but not her obscenities. "You're a sniveling coward, Diana," she screamed as she walked back to the bedroom. "You're nothing but a masturbating male." Catching a grotesque form in the balcony, she slammed her fist into her stomach. The pitiful expression on the baby's facial reflection propelled Diana into self-flagellation again and again. As the bile rose, she stopped and gazed into the red, sweating face. Wiping saliva from her chin, she turned from the windows and saw Lenise's bed. She threw herself onto it and buried her face into the comforter. Lenise had often told her about her sexual encounters, for Diana had feigned interest in hearing about indoctrination, only to hear Lenise talk about sex. Later she would return to her room and masturbate while imagining herself as Lenise's charge. She did so now, and cried when she came. Rolling over to one side to position herself for sleep, she spied Bertha's shawl on Lenise's rocker. It looked smaller than it had before. She got out of bed and picked it up. As it fell open, she caught a glimpse of Lenise that morning as she swung the shawl over her shoulders. The motion froze in her mind. The triangle form behind Lenise had a solid white shape. Diana held up the shawl and saw her reflection in one of the balcony windows, through the holes of the crocheted pattern. Lowering it slowly, she saw her entire drooped face. "This shawl had a liner," she exclaimed, flinging it back on the rocker. Standing before the dinette, she wondered why Lenise would alter the garment. Maybe she removed it because it made the shawl too heavy. It certainly looked heavy, she rationalized, remembering the movement necessary for Lenise to swing the shawl up and around herself. "Horse shit," she swore, slamming her hand on the table. "That rag belongs to an old woman. Lenise would never wear that piece of faded antiquity." She slammed her fist again on the table. Her rollings caused the table to shake and the flower vase onto it to teeter and to crash to the floor. Diana swore again and stooped down to clean up the mess. The vase was unbroken, having been cushioned by the thick carpet. She scooped up the flowers and started to put them back inside of it when she discovered a piece of thread. She fished it out, exclaiming, "So it did have a liner. And where is that liner now?" Her search through the chambers was pointless. Finding no more threads and no liner, she knew that Lenise had tried to cover up what she had done to the shawl. Returning to the dinette, Diana placed the flowers into the vase, wondering what Lenise was up to. "She still tells me everything. This will be a juicy bit of gossip." She got dressed and made the bed. Hope had returned with a promise of a shared secret. She no longer needed to stay in the chambers. Standing before the door, she looked back at the shawl on the rocking chair. "You'd better come through for me, Lenise," she said, pointing at the shawl. "I can only hate myself for losing you," she punched in the door code, "as long as you don't give me reason to hate you. She left Lanice's chambers.